Hey, welcome to Culture Shot. So this is the last lockdown Culture Shot here in South Africa. We come out of lockdown on Friday, the 1st of May, after 35 days. So if you're still in lockdown wherever you are in the world, you have my empathy. I realize how disruptive this whole thing is. We've got like a 5-phase system now, which we're going into. So phase 5 was total lockdown. That's what we've been in for 35 days. Phase 4 is what we're going into now, and it's honestly it's not terribly different, if I'm honest. But some things that are different. Some people will be able to return to work. So we're going to get the chance to observe what it's like when you test the edges of this thing, right? When people go back to work and how social distancing will work at work, what the rate of new infections is once people start moving around, that kind of thing. It's going to be interesting anyway. It's a change. One thing that's not going to change in a hurry is this stupid coronavirus hair of mine. I was overdue for a haircut before this happened. 35 days later, I'm now looking decidedly shaggy, and I don't think I'm going to get one until around about phase 2. So I don't know when that will be. Looking forward to that. Anyway, that's not the big idea for this week. The big idea, though, is one that I read on Twitter. I'll talk to you about that in a second. But the big idea I read on Twitter this week, and it's kind of been on my mind ever since. See, it came from Tom Peters, the management thinker. Now, you either love Tom Peters or hate him. He's a fairly polarizing guy. I love him. And what he said was that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but leaders who have been good during this coronavirus crisis tend to be leaders who were good anyway. And leaders who have struggled tend to be leaders who weren't very good. Anyway, that's roughly the idea. It sounds like a fairly obvious thing to say, but here's where it really resonated. Here's why it really resonated. See, I've been reading a lot about this topic over the last few weeks. The way I use Twitter, I use it extensively as a news aggregator, and I'd never follow more than 80 to 100 people. There are some people I follow all the time, but for the most part, I follow or unfollow people depending on what I'm interested in. So an example would be around about the time of an American election, September, October, November. I'll follow a whole bunch of people that I wouldn't ordinarily follow because I'm very interested in lots of varied opinions. And then after the election, when it's done, I tend to unfollow them all because I'm not perennially interested. I'm just interested during that period of time. And during this coronavirus thing, what I've been doing is following a lot of management leadership thinkers. Now, I don't ordinarily follow too many of those. I find that it pollutes my thinking to hear too much about what other people are doing. I've got my own little universe of clients and suppliers and partners and people that I work with, and there's a lot of interesting thought and experiment going on around me without having to just parrot what people are saying internationally. But around this period, I've been very interested because there's one particular type of story. Companies that are getting it right versus companies that are getting it wrong. And there's been a fair mix of those. There have been companies that have been really doing a great job of leadership during this period of time, and there have been companies that have just been failing abjectly. I shared one a couple of weeks ago, a story of a company that had actually kind of instructed its employees to switch their webcams on and take a photograph every 5 minutes just to make sure that people knew they were working. I mean, that kind of shit. It's just unbelievable. And so I've been very interested in these sorts of stories. And then Tom Peters comes along with this thing, and it suddenly hits me. That's exactly the whole lesson distilled into one statement. Because here's the truth. In order to be a good leader during this period, you must have empathy, i.e., you must recognize that people have different priorities, right? I mean, some people might be worried about illness, they might be worried about ill relatives, they're worried about elderly parents or something that they can't get to see. They've got homeschooling to do, kids around the house, more disruption rather. To expect that they're just going to be exactly the same and do exactly the same things and have the same level of performance is unempathetic and frankly wrong for the times. Trust is a critical thing. Leaders who are able to trust people to get on with their work, even though they're working from home, to kind of say, look, I know I've got a good bunch of men and women, a good bunch of people on my team, and I can trust them. Then those are people who have done quite well during this period of time, and leaders who have been able to communicate quickly and you communicate effectively. We're using fairly inefficient tools now. They're not the greatest things in the world. I mean, they're kind of pyrotechnic magic on the one hand, but they're not that comfortable to use. And so succinct and clear communication has been the hallmark of a great leader during this period of time. You've needed to have those things in order to be able to lead well during this period of time. The thing about it is, though, you've always needed those, and that's kind of what he's getting at with that statement. If you haven't been a good leader, if you haven't been able to trust your people, if you haven't had empathy, you were probably a lousy leader before. And it's just made you an even lousier leader during this period. It's made you, frankly, the worst kind of leader during this period, one who's incapable of adjusting to the new sort of way of being, all the new pressures, and now those deficiencies that leaders who are unable to cope with the current pressures, those deficiencies, just the spotlight's on them. They're impossible to deny. It's not just an organization-wide thing; it's an individual-wide thing as well. So what does this leave us? I mean, I think that going forward now, as we go back to work, and gradually we will all go back to work in one form or another. It'll be a little bit more normal than it is now. Leaders who have done well during this period have set themselves up and earned the right to lead people into the future, and probably will find, I hope we'll find, that follows through in terms of the way people react to them, people respect them, people are able to work with them, and the fact that the people that they lead are able to rise to it and contribute more simply because of the way in which the dynamic between them has been exposed as being so positive. But leaders that have struggled through all of this, I think you're going to find it very hard now with people suddenly back all under one roof, if that's the way it's going to be, or certainly working in a sort of more normal way. You're going to find it much harder to lead them, and there's quite a lot's been exposed here, I think. What do we do about that? I mean, clearly these soft skills, these soft and fluffy things, these things that we don't think are terribly important, or a lot of organizations don't, clearly those have been exposed to be the most important things of all. And it's all the more reason that we should focus on culture. It's all the more reason that we should focus on employee engagement and the impact leadership has on these two things. And those should be our driving forces going forward. No matter what, I realize we've now got production targets and all sorts of stuff which we've got to try and ramp up. But it's only going to happen with willing people. And willing people are only going to be willing if they're following great leaders. And those leaders are the ones that we've outlined have been the ones that have proved to be great during this period because they already were. I think there's a big lesson in that for everybody. Certainly been food for thought for me all week. I hope it's food for thought for you as well. And I wish you a very successful week.